All right, everybody. So, continuing to look at imperialism. Now, yesterday we looked at the biggest of the world empires of this period, and that will be the British. All of these industrial powers are going to build global empires where they conquer non industrialized regions, take them over, and use them as for resources for their industrialization and for um, their as for marketplaces for the goods that they produce. Well, a second example of an imperial power in this time is the United States of America. By the end of this period, the United States absolutely has an imperialist empire that's global, which means by definition we have to be a naval power. And it is kind of ironic. Start of this unit, we're not even a country. Into this unit, we're the most powerful economic state on Earth. Our factories are producing more goods than anyone else on Earth. We're a growing naval and military power, which becomes incredibly important in the 20th century. Now, we all know that starts off as 13 colonies. What is going to happen by the end of this time period is the United States is going to go from these 13 colonies all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That was not our land. There were people who lived there. We conquered their land. By definition, that's empire building. So again, there's definitely an American empire that's being built. Now, what is the justification that the United States is going to use to take the land of people who live there, like Native Americans, or in places like Texas and California, Mexicans' territory? We're going to use this idea. It's very similar to some of the other racist ideologies we've looked at, like social Darwinism and the civilizing mission. American imperialists believe in something called manifest destiny, which is it is the God-given right of the United States to rule all the territory between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And we have the right to take these various different groups of people's land, Native Americans most predominantly, but don't sleep on the fact we take a bunch of land on Mexico that we're going to talk about, because they're not white and they're not Protestant. And we have this moral right to do so because of the superiority of American racial systems and the superiority of American religions. Using superior weapons and organizations, natives are going to push off their traditional lands into reservations. I think we all know this story. This is something you've heard of before. This is not something that's coming to you as a complete and total shock. Hold on, let me fix a typo for future generations while I'm here. Protestants need to be capitalized. All right. So the first group of people's lands who take in large numbers are Native American groups. And we can do this because, again, superior weaponry, superior organization, and Native Americans in the Midwest and farther west lived in small hunter-gatherer groups that made them very, very, very vulnerable. They didn't have large-scale institutions and a great way of like resisting in mass. And there were lots of divisions amongst Native American groups where any time that the United States fought a Native American group, almost always we had Native American allies fighting with us because there was deep divisions amongst Native American groups. So taking over Native American territory was pretty easy. The other big group of people whose land we take away is Mexico. By 1848, Mexico had won its independence from Spain. It's a long story. It's an interesting story. I didn't give you the Mexican Revolution. But I think you should understand the basic ideas. Creoles start the Mexican Revolution. Mexico wins because Spain is greatly weakened after the invasions of Napoleon, and they never industrialized. You've not heard me talk one time in this unit about Spain being an important power in this unit. But when Mexico wins its independence, Mexico is going to struggle. They're going to go through cycles of revolution and conflict between Creoles, who are conservatives, and mestizo liberal leaders who want to see a new form of government. Very, 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 very honestly. And this is a very much more complicated story that I'm giving you. This is a story you're going to spend weeks on if you take APUSH next year. But again, I get 10 minutes to tell this story in this class. The very basic version of this story is America saw Mexico's weakness and saw an opportunity in 1848 under some very flimsy legal rationales. The United States declares war on Mexico in 1848 in a war that lasts approximately 6 months. The United States is going to take a third of all Mexican total territory in under 1 year. Territory that makes up the modern day states of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, California, and parts of Oklahoma, and Kansas, and Colorado, and even as far north as Wyoming, is all territory we're going to take away from Mexico in 1848. Again, why are we able to do this? Superior weapons, superior organization. Why do we justify this? Manifest destiny. White Protestants have this right. And again, the racist ideologies are a part of American expansion in this time period, just like they're part of the expansion of the Britishes and the Germans and the French and the Russians and the Japanese in this time period. So we're not unique. We're not uniquely different in those regards. Now, this first part of American empire building is to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The second part of American empire building is where we become a global empire. We've already talked about in a previous, about a month ago, about Americans under Matthew Perry coming into Japan with guns blazing and forcing the Japanese to sign a treaty where they agreed to trade with us. That's imperialism. That's empire building. In 1868, the United States purchases Alaska from Russia, which is a territory the Russians have taken over and conquered from native indigenous people. We bought it from them in 1868. I think the total was $8 million we paid for Alaska. When we purchased Alaska, the United States, the Secretary of State was a gentleman named Seward. He was Secretary of State, and he purchased it. Lots of people in the American media like, why are we spending all this money on this godforsaken piece of ice, basically? And it turns out to be one of the best, it's probably the second best real estate purchases in American history after the Louisiana Purchase, which is not something we talk about in this class. Alaska has paid for itself a zillion times over, but the purchase of Alaska was part of American empire building. Late 1890s, the United States conquers Hawaii, and it is a conquest. It's a long story, but the very shortened version of the story is Hawaii had been a monarchy, and the monarch of Hawaii had allowed American investors and planters to start pineapple plantations and sugar plantations in Hawaii, with the government and the monarch getting a cut of the income. Well, eventually these white American planters decided this system wasn't working for them, and they start a rebellion against the Hawaiian monarch. And the day they start the Hawaiian monarch, you'll never believe what just happens to show up in Hawaii on that very day, and that's the U.S. Navy. And again, with the combined organization and superior firepower of the U.S. Navy and military, the United States is able to conquer Hawaii, and that is definitely overseas, and this is definitely interregional. Again, why do we take it over? For the natural resources, and then to use it as a marketplace for our goods, just like what you see all industrial powers do. 1898, the United States starts a war with a greatly declining power, and that's Spain. So there's two states in the period 3 that were super powerful in period 2 that are not global powers in period 3. And those two states are Spain and Portugal. Spain and Portugal had conquered almost all the Americas in period 2. In the case of the Portuguese, had large territories all over the Indian Ocean. These states go into dramatic decline and basically lose all of their colonies. And that's not 100% true, but it's a mostly true statement. They don't industrialize. They never recover from the wars that Napoleon launched against them when they attacked them in the Napoleonic Wars. And these two are not world powers. They are in great, great, great decline. It's important that you know that because I've seen questions like that on the AP exam before. 1898, Spain's barely holding on. They had a few colonies in America, Cuba, Puerto Rico. It has some territories in the Pacific, Guam, most importantly, the Philippines, which they're still holding on to. By this point, the Philippines have been a Spanish colony for 400 years. And it's a long story that you will spend a couple of weeks on in a push the Spanish American War. It's not my purpose to give you all that. Basically, the United States, under some pretty flimsy justification, attacks and declares war on Spain. War lasts under a year. It's a global war. We fight them in the Caribbean. We also fight them in the Philippines. And basically, we just kick Spain's butts. And whatever the Spanish had pretty much in the Caribbean and the Pacific, the United States took from them as we are a growing imperial power. Next thing we're going to do that goes under imperialism is we're going to build a canal. One of the problems the United States has had is if you were in San Francisco and you needed to ship something to New York City, let's say, if you want to ship it by sea, you have to sail all the way around the tip of South America to get those goods to New York. And the United States have for a long time dreamed of creating an artificial canal that would make this trip shorter. Well, in Central America, there's a region we'll call Panama, and the hope was that we could build a canal through Panama. And again, I'm giving you a very short story of something you're going to spend a long time on in a push. Panama was under the control of a Latin American country called Colombia. The United States offered Colombia a large amount of money to purchase Panama, so purchase the rights to build a canal. Colombia said, no, this isn't enough money. We need more. And the United States, instead of increasing its offer to Colombia, sent some agents down to Panama and encouraged the natives of Panama to rebel against the Colombians. The second the Panamanians declared independence, you'll never believe this, but the American Navy shows up and backs them. And Panama wins its independence backed by the United States. And then they sell us this territory that we wanted to build a canal through at a greatly reduced price. And we build a canal. This is an example of economic imperialism, which you're going to hear more about, where the United States isn't going to try to take over Latin America through conquest, but we're going to try to control their economic systems and create favorable trade relationships with the threat of our power, enticing states to bargain and negotiate with us. If you're like, wow, Quattro, this is all really depressing. All you've ever talked about so far with America is the evils of slavery, and now we're just one of these dirty imperialist powers too. Yeah, early American history is kind of a dark place. Hot take that you've probably never heard from before. I'm a big proponent that the quote unquote good old days weren't that good. American slavery, American imperialism, suppression of women's rights. I would argue that the last 70 years has been the true glory era of the United States, the time period where the United States has ushered in a period of global peace, prosperity, and stability. But I don't have a lot of the positives to say about American history in this point. Just to give you this on a map, what the United States empire looks like by 1904, and it says 1904 because that's when the Panama Canal was finished. We've gone from 13 colonies to sea to shining sea. We've purchased Alaska. We've conquered Hawaii. Lots of these other little islands we took from Spain. Most importantly, we conquered the Philippines. We conquered Puerto Rico. We conquer Cuba, then give them their independence, but in reality, we control them. This area in green These are the regions where the United States is practicing economic imperialism, where we control their economic systems. And the most important example of that is the Panama Canal, which we finished building in 1904. But does this look like a global empire to you? Yes. Does it look like a naval-based empire to you? Yes. America is a rising imperial power by 1904. Now, while we are talking about rising imperial powers, let's take a moment to acknowledge the Japanese. Japanese are expanding military power globally. They want to be one of the cool kids. They want to build an empire. They want to conquer territories to use for their resources in their marketplaces. And they do so. So during this time period, the Japanese are going to conquer Korea. They're going to control a big chunk of China, which is what we currently call Manchuria. If you remember, the Japanese fought a war with the Russians over control of a chunk of Manchuria. And that's a great example of how imperialist powers are not cooperating. Russians and the Japanese fight a war with one another. What do they fight over? Territory in China, a colony they both want to have. Unfortunately, Japanese expansion never stops in period 4, and their urge and desire to continue to expand is going to be a major cause of a big old shindig. Also, if you'll notice this, the Japanese conquests are getting closer and closer to the Philippines. Who controls the Philippines? The United States of America now. All of this long term is setting the stage for a Japanese attack on the United States that's going to take place in the 20th century. But again, that's a down the road story. I just need you to know right now that just like other places, the Japanese are building an empire. Also, the Japanese use racist ideologies. They have a racist ideology that says ethnically they're superior to the Koreans and the Chinese, and they have the right to take this territory over. So they practice racist justifications for why they have the right to do these conquests, just like white European powers do. So if you're an industrial power, you're a racist using racist ideologies to justify conquest in this unit. And it's not just the white guys. In this case, it's the Japanese. One more big old group of people we need to speak about, and their expansion that takes place in this time period is the Russian expansion. Now, there's one thing that makes Russian expansion very unique. Russia is a land-based empire. They never really become a naval power. They attempt to, but for lots and lots of reasons, they don't. You'll note this territory in green was their original home-based territory, and this is the expansion that takes place. Part of it is in period 2, yes, but most of it is in period 3. Russia will build the largest land-based state in this time period. And it's a land-based state that is still the largest state on Earth and will probably remain that way for the foreseeable future. They take over lots and lots and lots of resources. Most of their expansion, we say, is westward. What they don't take over as they expand westward is lots and lots and lots of peoples. The groups of people who lived here tended to be indigenous populations, very similar to what you would have seen in Native American groups in the United States. Russia, like other states, is going to force culture, religion, and language on these groups of people. So we call this process Russification, and they're going to force all of these things on these native groups as they spread east. And guess what? That's a racist ideology when you're forcing your culture and language on groups of people that you've conquered. And again, they're going to spread all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They have all the other things that industrial powers do. Why are they able to take over these territories so quickly and easier? Superior firepower to the groups of people that they're trying to attack and take over. And again, they're doing so in search of resources, which they will find. One of the big things they're after is animal pelts, things like beaver pelts that were very, very, very valuable during this time period. Last thing, just want to reiterate this. Spain and Portugal, they decline. These are declining empires. So we've talked about the rise of new empires: United States, Japan, and Russia. Could also throw Germany in there. I probably should, because Germany has colonies in Africa. And none of these four were world powers at the start of this unit. Britain and France were, and they still are. But you have the emergence of four new global powers, and you have the decline into relative unimportance of the two big powers of period two, Spain and Portugal, which again is predominantly because they did not industrialize, at least not to the extent that these other powers did, and they have to pay the price for that. So that is the emergence of new empires. Hope you guys found that interesting. Got any questions, put them into the chat. Otherwise, you guys stick around for your work, and you guys have an awesome day.